Welcome, everybody. This is Gabe Hernandez with Comical Opinions. Posted up a new blog article today that got me. I was inspired by a couple other YouTube streamers that were having some conversations lately about the future fate of local comic book shops and where they can go from here. A lot of the issues that the comic industry is experiencing right now with the slowdown in sales, slowdown in, let's be honest, quality, problems with Diamond and everything else that's going on, the local comic book shops are downstream of that entire distribution model, and they're kind of stuck dealing with whatever comes their way through all kinds of issues. And people were talking about ways that the local comic book shop can shift the model of the business that they do and how they do business to something that may be significantly to radically different from what they're doing now. And one of the ideas I heard was, can they hire their own comic writers? Can they outsource? Can they just acquire the license, like if the characters were open domain? Like, if Batman was open domain, can I license DC to use Batman and then have some kind of local publishing house create their own comics? And I thought that was interesting, but honestly, it seemed like it was more work than was practical, and you would get very different or varied results of quality. And that's not good for anybody, especially when DC or Marvel or whoever else has sort of a brand image to maintain. The quality control on that might be a little bit too much for the local shop to bear. And it got me thinking. He said, well, what could they do differently that is take more of an active role in the publishing stream and the distribution model, so that way they can maybe cut out some of the middlemen or improve efficiency and what have you. And it got to me to thinking is, why couldn't we set up a model where the local comic book shop is their own printer? The technology certainly exists. The capabilities from a printing perspective and also from a point of sale perspective, I think are all there. And the more I thought about it, the more I thought, that's not a bad idea. So I posted up this kind of lengthy justification. It's not quite a white paper, but just basically a lengthy article talking about it. If you haven't already, go to the new website, comicalopinions.com. You'll see it's the latest blog idea. The category is ideas. Sure, why not? And I kind of talked through a little bit. So I wanted to post this big video up a little bit to kind of give you the highlights. I definitely recommend you go to the website. Definitely recommend you check out that article. And if you haven't already, I definitely recommend you comment and post, share, and discuss it. If you think it's a great idea, let me hear about it. If you think it's a terrible idea, let me know as well. And I'd like to hear your ideas as well. I think the more ideas we get out there, the more we discuss and share ideas, the better off everybody will be. So to start it off, I kind of go over a very, very brief highlight. And please don't ding me on not getting enough of the details. This is just a high-level summary just for anybody who's kind of not familiar with the model of how comic books get made from a distribution model perspective. It's just something to give them a little bit of a taste so they get an idea of how it works. Basically, you have a publisher like a Marvel or a DC. I use Marvel as the example. They put together the creative team. They come up with the concept, the story ideas, the drawings. They do all the pencils, the inking, the coloring, the lettering, the proofreading, the editing, all that stuff. But at the end of the day, what they wind up with is one or more files that they send to a printer. The printer takes the files and they print it into the type of book that Marvel wants to pay for, depending on the quality of the book, how thick it needs to be, what kind of paperweight, the inks, the colors, all that stuff, and the quantities. Now, the quantities come from the local comic book shop in solicitations. That's basically, they pre-order the books. They pre-order the number of books that they think they can sell, and Marvel takes up all those local comic book shop orders, says, okay, I need 40,000 of the first print. They send that over the printer, and the printer prints out the 40,000. Then the printer sends it over to the distributor, which would be typically somebody like a Diamond distribution, and the Diamond packages it up into little packages, splits up the whole printing order, and sends it off to the local comic book shops via United States Postal Service, FedEx, or whatever company makes sense. What's the problem? Well, the problem is you've got so many points along that chain of distribution. There's many, many opportunities for something to break down, and they often do. When Marvel sends those files over to a printer, the printer might screw it up. That's something that's been known to happen. It's less so now because everything is so digital and computerized, but that used to happen in the past. Some of the colors might get screwed up. the quality of the printer. I mean, just for something as simple as if the paper that when they put it through the printers is maybe just the humidity is a little too off, it can kind of screw up the quality of the paper, and you get uneven results. The colors might get washed out. All kinds of things can happen. Then when they send it over to Diamond, if you read the news anything about Diamond, you know they screw up all the time. They screw up the packages. They don't put the right books in the right box. Sometimes they give you too many. Sometimes they don't give you enough. And they're packed like, gorillas were throwing it around in the jungle, and they just stuffed it in a box. And then when the box leaves Diamond, via U.S. Postal Service, FedEx, whatever, they get all kinds of screwed up. Sometimes it's because of bad weather, the package gets lost in shipment, the box gets beat up, whatever, and then it finally comes to the comic book shop, and they have to unpack it and shelve it, and sometimes it's a mad dash depending on when they get the package and making sure everything's in place for Tuesday if you're DC, Wednesday if you're everybody else. So there's all kinds of ways that can get screwed up. So the idea that I had is, what if you could print them directly on site at the comic book shop? Now, some people say, oh, brother, don't. But hear me out on this one. If you go to something like a Staples or a Kinko's, which is usually in a FedEx office because they have a partnership or something like that, you can print out thick books and pamphlets and any kind of brochure that would be not too different from what you already get from a weekly floppy or a monthly floppy. Their quality is good, and their paper is just whatever you put into the machine. So the idea would be, you come into the comic book shop. I have a selection of whatever titles are available that week or that month up on shelves that are pre-printed, so you can kind of browse through and look through. Maybe they're watermarked to make sure nobody will just run off with them. You go up to the counter and you say, I want the latest issue of Spider-Man, as an example. They go in the back. They download a digital copy of that comic from Marvel through some kind of vendor portal that they would have to set up, and then they print it right there on site. They bind it. They staple it, they make sure it's the same quality, same level of color, and then they just give it to the customer after they pay for it. I make it sound very simple. I know I'm glossing that over a little bit, but it's actually not a bad idea. So I definitely recommend, again, you go to the article, check out some of the details as I lay it out. But if they can pull that off, there's some immediate benefits for that. For example, you don't have to deal with damaged goods, wrong orders, or delivery delays because something happened in shipping. No more guesswork. So one of the big problems that they have right now is a comic book shop has to guess about how many orders of a particular issue of a comic that they can sell. They might be right, they might be wrong, they might overestimate, they might underestimate. You don't have to deal with all that because in this model, everything is printed on demand. So you basically get exactly the number of comics you need for exactly when you need them, and there's no waste. You don't have to keep track of stock or excess inventory because you're not buying in bulk and then finding some place to store it. So you don't have to worry about storage space. You don't have to worry about making sure mice get at the comics because they're in some back room. You don't have to worry about having renting out all kinds of storage space. You only print it right there as you need it. You don't have to worry about, again, what we talked about, which is that late night scramble when boxes come in and they have to be ready by Wednesday. You don't have to worry about all these pallets coming in, unpacking everything, cataloging everything. All of that manual stuff with dealing with stuff, physical stuff, goes away. One of the other things that's always a big problem is lack of returnability. That was a big issue when Diamond shut down, and we were having a lot of conversations about LCSs and where they could go and kind of the challenges they're facing in a sort of new normal economy. Returnability is a big issue. When you're printing on demand, returnability is no longer an issue. It becomes moot. So the publisher always gets out the number of comics for exactly what they need, and it's always on demand, so they know that they're selling every single issue they get because it's sold before it's actually printed. So that's a big deal right there. The other part that I thought was very interesting with this model is shipping internationally is a hassle. So if you have, say, a comic book shop in Ireland, as an example, trying to ship comic books that are printed here in the United States and get them over to Ireland and get them in a timely manner right now is a big hassle. It's a big headache. Well, if they can download the file over the internet, and that's much less of a problem than trying to ship physical product, they can get that done pretty quickly. This also gives an avenue for people who are doing crowdsourcing like Kickstarter or Indiegogo, or doing independent comics, now they can potentially just create the file on their own and then send it over to a comic book shop. So that gives them an avenue for being able to get more people the comic that they have crowdfunded and get them over to the right place at the right time and actually do business with comic book shops, where now that's kind of not a model that's very well established. The idea here is you cut out all the middlemen, you cut out all the waste, you cut out all the damage and the loss and the inefficiency, and that maximizes the amount of margin that a comic book shop could get out of selling on a per comic basis. In a net world, that should be the ideal. And what would happen then is Marvel essentially says, okay, you printed out 15, or let's say they go to a comic book shop and the comic book shop says, I printed out 50 copies of the recent version of Spider-Man. And Marvel says, okay, you owe us X percentage of those number of comics. So that's kind of the model. And I think that would work potentially pretty well. It needs more in-depth investigation, but I think it will work out. Then if that works out, you can go a little bit further. Printers can be portable. So imagine a scenario where you have like a bookmobile, but instead of books, it's comics. And that comic mobile is going around to schools, high schools, colleges, wherever, when kids are letting out of school, and they can print out comics right there on demand. If they're small enough, then you can create kiosks, and you can put those kiosks in Walmarts, you can put them in malls, you can put them in shopping centers, and it gives you more exposure to more high traffic retail spaces. You could also do things like create cost competitive tiers. Remember, it's all based upon the ink and the printer materials, like the paper. Well, if they allow you to do something like, well, what if I just wanted this comic, but just give it to me in black and white? They can sell it at a reduced price for people who are just sort of casual purchasers who don't need the collectability and the speculator type quality that somebody who's investing in that comic. They just want to read something that they can grab and go as they're taking a road trip and then toss it when they're done. Well, you can do that now because you can just use like a newspaper level stock and maybe do just basic colors or black and white. You can sell those comics at a reduced price and potentially sell to more people who just want to do the casual sort of spur of the moment purchase. So that's a potential there as well. Of downsides, of course, well, printers are not cheap, especially if you're looking for something that's high grade, high business grade. Those can be expensive. So there's definitely going to be an upfront capital cost on that. Printing companies, I know for a fact, they do leasing, so there might be some leasing arrangement there, but it's always a question of how good is the maintenance agreement? What if the printer breaks down when you need it the most, and those kinds of things. You got to look at all those different risks and downsides. If we're talking about downloading a file that you would get from Marvel as an example, well, they would need to set up an online vendor portal. The security, the IT security on it would need to be really, really airtight to make sure that people aren't just breaking in and downloading files and all of a sudden Marvel's losing out on revenue. And you also need to kind of have that accounting in place to make sure that if somebody's printing out 20, 30, 50 copies, that Marvel's getting their cut. I mean, that's only fair. But that relationship and that technology is there, it's available, but it needs to be implemented. It needs to be implemented well. The other two pieces that I foresee could be an issue to this is it depends on how long it takes to print an issue. If it takes like 30, 40, 50 minutes, an hour, that might be an issue. I mean, people aren't going to wait that long if they're just coming in casually through the door and say, hey, print me out this copy of Spider-Man. However, that could work just for pull box orders where people have a chance to print that stuff out in advance. If they can get the printing down to, say, like 10, 15 minutes, maybe that's okay. But that's going to be really key to figure out whether or not this is going to work or not. The other cost is, how much is it going to cost to keep paper and all the inks? Color ink in particular can be very expensive. How much is it going to take for a comic book shop to keep all that in stock and make sure that they can print the stuff out on demand as they need to, potentially in high volumes? So I'm sure that's a couple items that could be downsides or things that need to be looked into, but I think it could work. But you know what? That's just my opinion. So if we recap that a little bit, I think this would be a viable model for local comic book shops. Obviously, it would take a lot of work. Obviously, it would take a lot of logistical setup. But I think it can be done, and I think it would be a much more stable, long-term play for the comic book shops. But let me know what you think. Please, again, go to comicalopinions.com. Check out the article. Read it in detail. Leave me your comments. And also, if you haven't subscribed to the channel, please comment down below in the video. Let me know what you think and keep track of what's going on. This is Gabe Hernandez for Comical Opinions. Thank you so much for your time, and have a great day.